for attending this Connect Together event. During this event, we have automatic closed captioning available. Please go to the bottom of the Zoom meeting, click Live Transcript, and then Show Subtitles to turn them on. Before we begin, we'd like to take a quick moment to let you know how you can join an opinion research panel made specifically for British Columbians living with disabilities.
For 25 years, the Disability Foundation has been fostering meaningful experiences for Canadians with disabilities through outdoor recreation, social connectedness, innovative adaptive devices, and more. Today we are asking, how has the pandemic affected you? Help strengthen decision makers' understanding of your needs and experiences by joining an online opinion research panel consisting solely of people with disabilities and their caregivers. Make a difference in your community today. The Disability Foundation. Reimagine what is possible.
Did you know? Young adults with disabilities have a harder time getting hired. Break down barriers by sharing your story. Take our survey.
All right, Jordan, you can carry on. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Great.
Good to be seeing all ya. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here, and I'm going to pop it into present mode. All right. All righty, folks. Are you able to see my screen there? It should say simplest method to start seeds indoors.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, I think, why don't we start rolling straight into everything? How's I guess just how's the last month or so been since we last connected here?
Wet.
Sorry. Can I interrupt for a second? I'm new to these meetings. I myself am blind. So if you have anything that is up on subtitles, could somebody read it out?
Sorry, would you share that one more time?
I'm blind, so if you have anything that is coming up on the screen that is going to be in subtitles, would somebody be able to read it out?
Yes, I'll be talking through everything here.
Okay.
And then
Gina, there is live transcript if you can see that, and it will have
blind.
CC.
I'm blind. I can't see it.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, so that's why if there's just subtitles and it's on the screen, if somebody could just read it, then I could follow along.
For sure.
Thank you.
Gina, wonderful to be meeting you first and foremost. This is great to have you online here. And the one thing that I'd love to ask of you is just if there's anything at any point that you're needing a little bit more information on, or for me to explain a little bit further because of not having the visual for it, please just like jump in at any point. Just let me know, like start talking, and we'll pause and spend a little bit more time on that, okay?
Great, thanks. I really appreciate that. Awesome.
My pleasure. Yeah, you know, it's an area that I really want to make all of these pieces as accessible as possible. And there's some things in here where you just don't know until you're going through it for the first time. So please do, if there is anything that for anybody is unclear or is not as accessible as we'd like it to be, just stop me in my tracks here and interrupt me, and we'll dive into unpackaging that piece in a way that works for everybody. So really appreciate you sharing that with us here, Gina, at the very beginning.
Thanks.
And Gina, I think I've met everybody else, but for yourself, I am Jordan. I'm the founder here at Mind and Soil. And so we're a gardening business based out of Squamish, British Columbia, Canada. But we're also, I guess, a little bit different in some ways in that we are entirely focused on connecting individuals to the mental health benefits that come from gardening. Nice. So for some folks that perhaps like Elizabeth, I know have been gardening for some time. I know that a big part of why we love getting our hands dirty is because of just kind of how peaceful and how calming, how restorative it is and it feels. I see Terry giving me the thumbs up there on the screen. And for anybody that's on kind of the newer side to gardening, I know that it can be a little bit daunting and overwhelming. And so a big part of our responsibility here at Mind and Soil is to do a lot of education like this to try and make it kind of as simple and as easy to be getting into gardening as possible. And so a lot of the work that we do is on YouTube with videos. But Gina, if you have a question at any point where you're wondering about something gardening related, just send me an email, send me a voice note, and I can reply with a voice note or email something along those lines to walk you through it step by step there. So cool. Definitely, like I really do care very deeply about kind of helping any way that I can for people to be getting their hands dirty and just feeling how good gardening is and how it feels. Alrighty, so what we're of course focused on for today is seed starting. And so what I want to kind of take a look at here are two of the seedlings that I've been growing. And this first one here that we're looking at on the left, that is a seedling that I started in my very first year. And Gina, if you like this seedling here, it's teeny tiny, barely growing, really struggling. And so in that first year of starting seeds, I didn't know too much about how to go about starting seeds. And over the course of the last several years, I've learned a whole lot, and I've done tons and tons of little experiments. So now the seedlings that I grow and kind of ultimately have going into my garden are much larger, like this one on the right here, and very kind of green, lush, and full of life. And so the things that I'm going to be walking us through today are going to allow each and every one of you to be having beautiful seedlings super early on in the season that you ultimately can be moving into your gardens, where I like to kind of call it as their forever home here. So really looking forward to walking you through really just kind of all the things that I've learned over the course of the last couple of years here. And we're going to break this into two areas. So the first area is going to be, what are the materials that we need to have on hand in order to start seeds? And then the second piece is, what are the what's kind of the method that we want to go about utilizing in order to start these seeds, so that they don't stay kind of teeny tiny and small, but rather really grow and really thrive from the beginning. So with that being said, the first part that we're going to go into are our materials, and we're going to talk through the different materials that we want to have on hand. And then I'm going to pause for a couple of questions at that time, and then we're going to go through that method for how we go about starting seeds. So to begin diving straight in, there are 6 materials that we want to have on hand for starting seeds. The first one is that we need to have seeds. Fairly straightforward and self-explanatory on this one. And I know that, say like Elizabeth, that she had already joined one of the happy hours that I did with West Coast Seeds. I really love the folks over at West Coast Seeds. They've been just incredibly supportive of what we're doing with getting gardening to as many individuals as possible. And I've been utilizing their seeds since about kind of 2016 or so. So any of the pictures, any of the videos that we put together, those are all coming from seeds that I originally got from West Coast Seeds. So that's the first material that we would be needing. The second material is that if we have our teeny tiny little seeds, we need something to put them in for them to begin to germinate. And that's where we have our seedling mix. And this is, of course, an area where I'm very biased, because we have our worm casting seedling mix here at Mind and Soil. And that worm casting seedling mix, I think I've got all of your addresses now. I am going to be mailing some of it to each and every one of you. So we're going to pay for the seedling mix. We're going to pay for the shipping. We're going to get that out to each and every one of you so that you can be utilizing it this coming season. And the reason why I'm so kind of fond of this seedling mix is because within it, there are kind of all the microbes and all of the nutrients that the plant needs to really be thriving from the beginning. And it has that because we utilize worm castings and we utilize compost in that mix as well there. So the team over at West Coast Seeds, they did this trial where they put it directly alongside a regular sterile store-bought mix. And what happened with this mix is that they found that the ones that they were utilizing and growing in our seedling mix were growing kind of like 2 times larger than the ones in just a sterile store-bought mix. And they were also much kind of more green and lush and full of life there. So it was just kind of a really clear example of how big of an impact that seedling mix ends up having on the plants thriving from the very beginning. So if we've got seeds and we've got seedling mix as our first two, kind of materials to have on hand, well, then the third material that we need to have on hand is something to put them into. So the third thing that we want to have on hand for starting seeds are seed cells and seedling trays. And so I actually really prefer to utilize 3-inch seed cells than the kind of like, really small little plugs that you'll see some folks utilizing. There's some where, to put it into perspective, on that tray that is in the back of that picture there, you could fit 18 of the 3-inch seed cells in there. But if you're using those smaller plugs, you'd fit like 72 in there. And so you can fit more in there, but I just had a really hard time working with them, trying to pull the plants out without breaking the plants. And on top of that, they don't stay moist for as long. So they dry out more quickly, which decreases the number that were germinating for me. So I like to start with something a little bit larger, 3-inch seed cells. And then it also saves me a step of not having to pot them up from being in a really small little plug into ultimately a 3-inch seed cell, which they're going to end up in regardless. So those are the first 3 materials. Now, the fourth material, it is the most important one. I wish that I could sit here and say that the seedling mix, you got to have that. It's the most important piece to have, but there's something that's even more important, and that is a grow light. And so when we think about plants, they need to have ultimately moisture, and they need to have warmth in order to germinate. And then in order for them to grow, they need to have a fuel source like their soil, their seedling mix, but then they also need to have light to be putting that fuel to use. And so if they're only getting a little bit of light, then they could have the best fuel in the world, but they're only going to grow so much. So the kind of the grow light, that ensures that we're getting enough light to them and for enough hours in the day. So what I want to kind of walk you through now is a couple of examples of what that kind of is in different environments. So if we were to take a windowsill, and I've got this little app on my phone that tells me how much light is coming through that windowsill. And so in this particular image, we can see on the windowsill, there are 4,041 lumens that are coming through. That's the amount of light that is pouring through to where the seedlings are sitting. And each one of those seedlings in the background of the image there, we can see that they're growing fairly tall and long, and they're not staying short and stubby. And what this means, what the plant is telling us when it's growing kind of on the taller and longer side opposed to short, is that I don't have enough light. I'm growing out towards the light. And when we look at this picture, we can see that each one of these plants is bent over to the left, which is where the window and the light source is. They are reaching towards the window, trying to get towards more and more of that light, which is a telltale sign that we need to be providing it even more light. So if we were to then contrast that with a grow light, we'll take a look at this. This grow light here is actually even worse. So it only has 555 lumens. So now we've gone down from 4,000 to 555. So not all grow lights are created equal. And this was the grow light that I utilized in my first year of seed starting when I had no idea what I was doing. And so why did my seedlings not grow all that much in the first year? They just weren't getting enough light. That was a big part of what the problem was that I was experiencing. And so to kind of figure out, okay, I know that I need a good light source for my plant babies. Which grow light is going to be good? Last year, I bought 6 different grow lights and started seeds side by side. I had little wood panels between each of them so that I could know exactly which lights are performing best. And take a look at this. The one that we now have on our website, it gives out 36,000 lumens. So we've gone from 500 under a poor grow light to 4,000 in a windowsill where our plants were still bending over and telling us that they're leggy, not getting enough light, to now up to 36,000 lumens. And right below my phone there, the foliage on those plants, it's green, it's lush, the leaves are really, really big and vibrant. That's what we want to be seeing from our plant babies, and we need to have a good light in place for that. Now, as I mentioned a couple moments ago, we're going to be sending seedling mix to each and every one of you. I really, really want to be sending a grow light to each of you as well. But we're just going to have to hang tight for another week or so here. The reason behind that is because we had sold through all of ours, and we've been scrambling, trying to line up more. We had secured some yesterday, put through our payment for it, and then got an email this morning that there was a fire in the supplier's building. And so they don't have those, or they're not even going to be able to get them out to us in time. So we're scrambling around today to try and get our hands on more. If we do end up getting some more, basically to the business here, then, I really, really want to make sure that we can get some of these to you. So hang tight on that front, but my fingers are crossed that we can get grow lights out to each of you, because it does make such a big impact on the plants growing well. So those are 4 of the 6 materials. We're going to do the next 2, and then I'm going to pause for a moment there to see if there are any questions that I can be answering. So the 5th material that we want to have on hand is a thermometer. Now, the reason why we want to have a thermometer on hand is because the temperature where we're starting our seeds plays a really, really big role in whether or not they will grow. And so ultimately, I'm going to show you a picture in just a second. I just finished an experiment where I started seeds at 50 Fahrenheit, 60 Fahrenheit, and 70 Fahrenheit, and 70 Fahrenheit, that's about 21 Celsius. And so take a look here. What we can see on the left-hand side, when it was 50 Fahrenheit, which I think is around 12 or maybe even a little bit cooler Celsius, only a few of the kale seeds germinated, and they're really not growing all that well. They're kind of just surviving, trying to stay alive, rather than really, really thriving. Now, when we move over to the next one, which is at 60 Fahrenheit, now we're seeing a little bit more germination, right? So a couple more of the kale plants have germinated, and they have put on some actual leaves. And the basil seeds, it looks like about 3 of them have germinated, but the basil seeds, they kind of look like how the kale seeds looked at 50 Fahrenheit, where they're not really growing, they're just kind of surviving and staying alive. But then when we shift to 70 Fahrenheit, 2021 Celsius, what we see at that point is that all of our plants are growing and thriving and really putting on a lot of growth. So for each one of these sets of seeds, every other variable was the exact same. The number of seeds that I tried to start, the type of grow light that I was utilizing, the 3-inch seed cells, all those pieces were the exact same. The only difference was the temperature. So we really want to make sure that wherever we start our seeds is at least 70 Fahrenheit, 2021 Celsius. And so that becomes a little bit of a game of trying to figure out an area in the house that is that temperature. And I can chat through a couple of ways that we can create a little environment that is that warm if need be. And so then the 6th and final material that we like to have on hand for starting seeds is something to be watering with. And this is where the kind of tool that I like to have on hand for this is actually a turkey baster. And so a turkey baster I have found to be a really, really good watering tool, because it ultimately allows you to kind of limit the amount of water that you can fill up on at once. And then you can very gently and slowly release that into the seedling mix and kind of evenly move it throughout the seed cell. But then on top of that, as our plants really begin to grow and get large, because of how long the spout is on a turkey baster, you can kind of duck and dive going through the different plants there to get that water right down into the root zone of where that plant is living. So turkey baster might not be the most glamorous watering tool on the market, but it works really, really well for watering. So those are the materials that we want to have on hand for starting our seeds. And the next piece that we're going to walk through is how we go about actually utilizing these materials to get our seeds germinating and growing. But what I want to do for a second is just pause to see if there's any questions that anybody has. So you can either shout them out over top of me here. You can put them into the chat function. The floor is yours to ask any questions that you might have.
What was the name of the seedling mix again?
Yeah, that is our worm casting seedling mix. And
Worm
Gina, have you, did you get the email from Elizabeth with addresses to share with me to ship it off to you?
No, I didn't.
I didn't have your email. Gina, can you put your email in the chat?
If I just tell you my email, could somebody do that for me?
Here, I'll be able to type it in. Let me, go ahead, Gina.
It's educator
Yep.
at drcvictoria.com.
All right, so educator, EDUCATOR.
Educator, CATOR.
Yeah, EDUCATOR.
Yep.
At DRC Victoria, VICTORIA.com.
Yes, perfect.
Brilliant. I've
Thank
just
you.
popped that into the chat function there.
Thank you.
Perfect.
And
I will send you an email after this workshop and get your address, Gina.
thank you, Elizabeth.
Okay, no problem.
One more quick question. What's the name of the grow light? You say about 36,000
Lumens.
lumens?
Yep.
What would the
so
grow
that-
light?
That's the amount of light that's coming from the grow light that we utilize and that we sell on our website. And that is the Monios L grow light. So Monios is spelt MONIOS-L.
Okay.
The challenge at the moment is just that those are like we're not able to get our hands on anymore right this second. But Gina, a really great alternative to that you could look into is Sun Blaster. So just Sun, S-U-N, and then Blaster, B-L-A-S-T-E-R. And that is their T5 LED that you would want to go with.
T5 LED. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And yeah, and you know, the grow light again, I really do believe it is the most important material for the seed starting process. But it's really, really cool because once you have a grow light on hand, well, now you can be gardening and growing things 12 months of the year. So you could be starting your seeds, but you could also like start your seeds a month earlier and do a test run to see what variables you need to kind of continue to tweak or change or play around with. And then as we get into the fall time, you could bring, say, like your pepper plants indoors and you can overwinter them and they will continue to grow. And then you place them back into your garden the following season. So you don't have to be starting new peppers every single year. They're actually a perennial. And then you could also be doing something like microgreens over the course of the winter if you just wanted to be doing some form of a really short growing crop. All the way through to like, we've got some individuals in our community that have built out a full kind of like indoor tea Zen garden that they utilize with their grow light. So I really like, you know, it's not something that you'd ever need to spend more than $100 on. And it just opens up this amazing window for, you know, trying out and playing around with growing. And, you know, there's even times where like early on in the season, I'll bring in like a little like succulent or something that was like living outside over the winter, and I'll pop it under the grow light just to see the difference between how does it grow indoors versus outdoors, and how big of an impact is it having by being in that more ideal environment earlier on.
Awesome. Awesome.
Gina, you get really long-winded responses from me because I get very excited about gardening.
That's, you know what? When people are passionate, it's attention grabbing. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No,
That's
my
great.
pleasure.
Yeah.
My pleasure. Any other questions there on the materials side?
Yeah, Jordan. Terry, I have worm composting at home here. What's your mixture, or is that a trade secret?
Oh, amazing. I love the fact that you've got, so you've got a little worm farm of some sort?
I do. Worm factories.
Terry, how have you been keeping this information from me for all these sessions that we've been on?
Oh, yeah, it's just something I've had for years.
I love it. I love it. Well, don't get me started on worm farming because we'll never get off of this call if that's the case.
But I use about 1/3 in my potting mix. 1/3.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. So what I'll do, I haven't shared this with anybody before, but you guys will be the first ones that I share our recipe with here. And I've been thinking about it more and more. And, you know, I'll provide a little bit of background and context for my thoughts, and then I'll share the recipe. But, you know, at the kind of core of what I want to do with Mind and Soil is to, you know, ultimately introduce 1 million individuals to gardening's mental health benefits. And so a big part of that is making gardening as accessible as possible. And part of the challenge for us as a business is that, like, you know, to be shipping soil to folks all across Canada, it gets really expensive. And so I find myself in this, you know, kind of like challenging position very frequently where I'm like, I wish that I could be charging you nothing for this, but then we wouldn't be able to be building Mind and Soil, putting all these videos together, all this content together to be helping people. So it puts me in this tricky position where I know that we need to be charging a certain amount in order for us to be paying our bills, but then that could make it inaccessible to certain individuals that might not be able to get it delivered. So what feels like a good solution for me is ultimately to share the recipe that I've been, you know, kind of working on for 3 years, so that for an individual that, you know, isn't going to be able to order it and get it delivered to them, they still can utilize something very similar to what we would do. And then those that really believe in what it is that we're working on and creating, like, they're getting an amazing product, but they're also supporting our cause, our mission, our initiative. So that's the kind of latest on my thinkings on that front. So with that being said, I've played around with so many different ratios in terms of our worm casting seedling mix. And the one that we have for this season, like, it is performing so well in all of the little tests and experiments that I do. And so what I go with is it's 9 parts. So if we were to just kind of think of each part equal, and so 4 parts of that are compost. So if it was a, you know, like if you're making a 9-liter tub of it, you'd grab 4 liters of compost. Now with that compost, we sift it all through a 1/4 inch screen. So any of the bigger chunks that are in there, they all get removed. So it's only the smaller pieces of compost that are in there, so that there aren't any big air pockets in the little seed cells. And that takes like a good amount of energy and effort here for us sifting through thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of compost. So once you've got that compost, then the next piece is 3 parts potting mix. So if like kind of whatever potting mix that you'd be able to get your hands on at a store, that's what you're going to want to add. That's going to make it a little bit lighter because it's a much lighter material than, say, compost or worm castings, which are heavier in organic matter. So 4 parts finely sifted compost, 3 parts potting mix, and then 2 parts worm castings. And those are like 100% pure worm castings. Everything on that is going through a basically like a 2 to 3 millimeter sift. So there's nothing that is larger or chunkier coming from the worm castings, only the goods on that front. And then I mix all that up. We use a cement mixer to kind of spin it around, get it all mixed up. And then that is the mix ready to go. So Terry, I think you're on the right path there, and just a couple of other steps that we would be utilizing in ours.
Yeah, sounds good.
And if I see Terry's worm casting seedling mix on the market next week, then we're going to have a chat.
I'll need a bigger factory.
Love it. These are great questions so far. Any other questions? Okay, should we dive into the method here? And as we do that, Gina, I'd love a little bit of feedback here just quickly in terms of explanations so far, if they've been making sense, if there's kind of more detail that I can be adding to anything. Let me know how I can make this a better experience for you.
Yeah, so far it's great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Perfect. Love it. All righty. Well, and you've still got the full right to cut me off at any point as we dive through the method here if something is not making sense. So do take me up on that if you feel like it. Okay. So what I want to walk through is the method for now starting the seeds. And again, a lot of it is really just making sure that we have that right environment in place, right? That we've got the worm casting seedling mix, that we've got lighting, that we've got warmth, that we've got moisture. And if we have all those pieces, then it's really straightforward to bring it to life. So in terms of the method, it's 5 steps that we go through. And the first step is simply to grab one of our seed cells, and we want to fill that seed cell to about 1 centimeter from the top. So what you're going to be doing is, kind of getting the seedling mix into our seed cells, and then just ensuring that there's about 1 centimeter of space between where the seedling mix stops and the top lip of our seed cell. And I like to just kind of like shake them a little bit to let the seedling mix evenly distribute throughout that seed cell. So there's kind of like a nice flat bed that we're ultimately going to end up putting our seeds on. So we have our seedling mix in our seed cell. It's filled it up to about 1 centimeter from the top. The second step is that we need to get that moist. So for a seed to germinate and to begin to grow, it needs to be in a warm and moist environment. So to get that first kind of bit of moisture in there, we are going to grab our turkey baster and we're going to fill that up with water. And then we go over to our seed cell and we kind of empty that whole turkey baste of water into one of the seed cells. So 1 turkey baste per seed cell for this round. And we're going to do 3 rounds of watering. So each of these seed cells is going to end up getting 3 turkey bastes of water. But I really like to do it in rounds because we're not like flooding it all in at once, but rather it's the first bit is getting in there, it's soaking in, it's getting absorbed, and then we continue along, and later we'll do the second round and the third round. Okay, so we've got seedling mix in the seed cell, and we now have a turkey baste of water in there. The third step that we want to be going through is that we need to place our seeds into the seed cells. And so in this particular instance, I'm just dumping them out into my hand, and then I'm placing them and evenly distributing them into the seed cell there. And so this is where my approach, or I suppose my philosophy, is that each one of the seed cells that we have represents one plant that we'd want to have in the garden. So if I want to have 3 tomato plants, then I would set 3 seed cells aside for those 3 tomato plants. And then in each one of those seed cells, I would put 5 seeds. So that would end up being 15 tomato seeds that I would be looking to start. And the reason why I start 5 seeds per desired plant is just because I want to make sure that, at least one of them germinates. It's very likely that there'll be 2 or 3. And if I have, say, 3 seeds that end up germinating, I can then choose which one is growing strongest as the one that I want to move into the garden. So I like to start 5 seeds for every desired plant that I want to be having in my gardening space. And once we have those seeds in there, we need to get them moist. So we're on to our second round of watering. Same thing, we just fill our turkey baster up with a full turkey baste of water, and we put that whole turkey baste onto 1 seed cell. And so once that first seed cell is done, we then refill it, go to the second seed cell, and just kind of unleash that second turkey baste of water into the second seed cell, and then continue to the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, etc. So those are then, nice and moist seeds that are sitting then into that seedling mix. And we're starting to create this really beautiful environment for these seeds, right? Again, for the seeds to germinate and to begin to grow, it needs to be moist and it needs to be warm. So by adding that first turkey baste in, followed by that second turkey baste, we've ensured that there is now moisture in the seedling mix below, but also right across each one of those seeds that we just put in there. So Moving on to our fourth and second last step here, we now just want to cover them with a little bit more seedling mix. So all that I'm going to be doing here is just grabbing about a half handful worth of our worm casting seedling mix, and then just kind of like gently placing that over top. And so what we're doing in this particular instance is, I would say about a centimeter worth of these seedling mix that we're putting over top. And it could be a little bit more than a centimeter. It could be a little bit less than a centimeter. It's definitely not an exact science, and it's going to be okay if there's a little bit more or a little bit less. And again, I'll start my zucchini seeds, which are one of the largest seeds that we'll come across with this method. And I'll start my basil seeds, which are one of the smallest seeds that we'll come across with this exact same method. So I haven't found that, planting things really deep or really shallow makes a huge difference. Just having that nice little sprinkling, about 1 centimeter of seedling mix over top is all that they need. And the reason why we want to have that in there is because the second thing we do is we get it moist as well. So we grab our turkey baster, and now we do our third round of water. Exact same as the first two, we fill it all the way up, and then you dump out the whole thing on that one seed cell. And then you refill the turkey baster and you move to the second seed cell. Refill the turkey baster, move to the third seed cell. And so now our seeds, they've got moisture not only below them, but also right on top of them from that second round, and in the seedling mix above them from the third round. So those little seeds, they have everything except for one thing that they need to germinate. That last thing that they need is warmth. So our fifth and final step for starting our seeds is that we want to find a nice and warm environment. So this is where, with that thermometer, we're going to go around and try and find somewhere in our house that is at least 70 Fahrenheit. And if it is that you don't have an area in your house that's at least 70 Fahrenheit, what you can do is kind of one of two things. You could either enclose a small area, either using something like one of those larger Tupperware totes or a sheet. I utilize a sheet going around my seed starting station, and I put a little space heater in the bottom. And so as soon as that goes above 22 Celsius, it turns off. And then as soon as it drops down below like 21 Celsius, it turns back on, bumps the temperature just back up a little bit, and it keeps that area very, very consistently in kind of like, again, that 20, 21 Celsius, 70, 71, 72 Fahrenheit range. And that's what seeds really, really like and love when it comes to germinating. The other way that you could go about doing that is with a heating mat. And so with a heating mat, all that you would do is just place that underneath the seed cells, and it's going to warm up the seedling mix that the seeds are sitting in and resting in, and then ultimately increase the likelihood of germinating. If you go down that path of utilizing a heating mat, my recommendation is to put your thermometer right on this on the kind of like the little heating mat, because it's going to then tell you what that temperature is that your seedling mix is interacting with. And the reason why I encourage that is because it's probably going to be about like 85 or so, like it's fairly warm, those heating mats. And so your seedling mix, it might dry out a little bit quicker, which would just mean that you would want to be watering on a more frequent basis. And that's something that we're going to basically be chatting about next year. So with those seedlings or the seeds at this point sitting underneath the grow light, we want to leave that grow light on for 12 to 13 hours per day. And so this is, again, a big part of, I guess, why I love grow lights so much, is because like the best lit window that I have, it only gets the sun directly streaming through it for about 3 hours over the course of that day. And even if it was like a perfect window, when the sun is rising at 7:30 in the morning and setting at 5, 6 p.m. at night, that's still just not quite enough hours for what our plant babies would be wanting to really be thriving. And so having that grow light on, we now just let our little seeds hang out underneath that grow light for 12 to 13 hours per day. As they do that though, and if they are on a heating mat, the seedling mix is of course going to dry up. And so when do we go about watering them? And so my rule of thumb is to go with 1 turkey baste of water every 2 to 3 days. And the kind of way that we're going to go about doing this is one of two options. The first option would be to take a look at it, and if you see that the seedling mix is looking more like a milk chocolate, a lighter brown, that's a sign that it is dry. If it's looking more like a dark chocolate, that's a sign that it is still moist. Now, the alternative option would be to place the back of your hand onto the top of that seedling mix. So just kind of gently place your hand down on the seedling mix and then rub your fingers on the back of your hand that was just on the seedling mix. If you feel any moisture on there, then you're good. It's still moist. But if when you do that, you can feel like there's little specks of dirt on there, I don't feel any moisture whatsoever, that is a sign that it is time to be watering. And again, that's going to be about 2 to 3 days from when you did your last watering. And I can't tell you that it is definitively going to be 2 days or 3 days, because if you are using a heating mat, that's going to dry the seedling mix up a little bit quicker, and you're going to be watering kind of probably more on an every 2 day basis. If you're using something like a fan to move air through there, that's also going to dry up the seedling mix more quickly. So there's different factors that each of us are going to have in play that's going to make that watering vary a little bit from 2 days to 3 days, but it's going to be in and around that range. So I would go off of that as a kind of like benchmark or some kind of like guideposts, and then get a bit of a feel by either observing by looking at it or observing by touching it, which is best for you, if it's 2 days or 3 days. And so, go ahead.
I was going to say, would weight, like, are they easy to pick up? Like, because sometimes after you do your first water, you could kind of judge it by weight.
That's a great point. And like absolutely 100%. So when we think about it, right, like the organic matter, it's holding on to moisture over the course of those 2 to 3 days. That moisture has evaporated, it's been absorbed by the plant, it's been put to work. And so it gets lighter over the course of those 2 to 3 days. And so on that first day, that could be like a really beautiful way of going about it, is like get a bit of a feel for how heavy that seed cell is. And then once you notice that it's like significantly lighter than that, that's when, again, you know it's okay, there's no more moisture in there. It's time to go about watering. So I think that's a really great way of doing it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And I think, a big thing from my perspective is that like, there absolutely isn't like a right way and a wrong way to garden. It's all about kind of like starting with some parameters or goalposts and then figuring out what works best for you through different little experiments and playing around. And so there are like probably a gazillion different ways that you could go about starting seeds different to what we're doing today. And I'm a big believer that none of those are right, none of those are wrong, but rather it's kind of like what works best for each individual. And so I really, really love that approach there. Perfect. So one thing that I have here to kind of stay on top of the watering side is a little seed starting tracker. And so in here, what we're able to do is write down the vegetable that we are growing, and then ultimately keep on top of how often we are watering it. So if we were to take the vegetables that I started the other day, those were tomatoes, kale, basil, zucchinis, and cucumbers. And we saw them, they were all just sitting underneath that grow light there. So on day 0, I've given them their watering. And so what I want to do now is I want to fast forward to day 3 so that we can see, has anything germinated? Is it looking like milk chocolate? Do we need to be doing our watering? So let's take a look here. And as we go down the line, we're on day 3. And what we can see is nothing's germinated except for a little kale baby. So the kale had germinated in that instance. And I was on day 3. So even though there was still some moisture in there, I was like, I'm going to do my next round of watering. So I fill my turkey baster up. And then I, again, do 1 turkey base per seed cell. And I just go down the line, evenly spreading that over the top of each of those seed cells so that they get the full turkey base of water, and that it just kind of works its way into the seedling mix. And then I go over to my seed starting tracker, and I just check off that I have done my day 3 waterings, my 1 turkey base for each one of those plants. Now let's fast forward to day 6. That's when we're doing our next watering. Let's see if we have anything that has germinated. And look at that. We've got basil has now germinated. We've got a zucchini that's now germinated. We've got all 5 of the tomato plants germinated there, 3 cucumbers, and 1, 2, 3 kale plants as well. And this is only 6 days in from when we just went through putting those seeds into those seed cells there. And so it kind of goes to show that if we just get that right environment in place, and we then let our babies hang out and we give them a little bit of watering, that they are going to do their thing. So on day 6, I'm then doing my next round of watering, filling my turkey baster up, and then again, kind of sharing 1 turkey baster of water onto each one of those seed cells. Easy peasy. And then I go to my seed tracker and I pop in day 6 that I have popped, another turkey baster of water into each one of those. And so the last thing that I want to go through is what happens, or like when we fast forward a couple of weeks here, what does that look like in that particular instance? So now let's go to day 25 with those exact same seeds and take a look here. Everything is growing really, really well. So the zucchini there is huge. The basil's good. The tomatoes nearly touching the top of the grow light now. And then we got our cucumbers and our kale as well. And so in this particular instance, it's only just over 3 weeks in, and we've got multiple sets of leaves on each one of these plants, and all of them growing really, really well. And I didn't change anything during that period. I just continued to go about watering about every 3 days and allowing them to grow and just absorb as much of that light as possible. So that's everything that I wanted to walk through for today, but would love to hear if anybody has any questions on any of this.
The comment on the seed starter, the heating pad, I just discovered that last spring, and what a difference.
Yeah, hey?
Yeah.
Amazing. I love that. And Terry, do you have a grow light?
Not yet. No.
Not yet. That's going to be the next jump for this season for you.
That's it.
Love it. Yeah, the temperature piece, we're going to have a video coming out on our YouTube account this coming Sunday that walks through an experiment that experiment that I did at 50, 60, and 70 Fahrenheit. And it's remarkable how big of a difference temperature has, like 1 on the germinating side, but then 2 also on like that whole growth side, and shifting from just surviving to thriving.
Is anybody on this call from Victoria?
No, Port Moody.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I'm over in Squamish.
Nice. It's just, we're the Victoria Disability Resource Center, and in our community garden, we have some raised beds that are accessible for anybody. So I just wanted to, if anybody was in Victoria, to let you know that we have that.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love to hear it.
So Terry, where do you grow your seedlings? Just in a room?
I have them, yes, quite a big living space here. So
Okay.
just in front of the wind. Well, I don't have anything started yet, but I envision it over there. Yeah.
No, I was thinking people would have to have this big grow thing down in the basement, but looking at your pictures there, Jordan, you just need one tray with different little.
Yeah, like here, I'll show you real quick. Let me just pull this here. So
I think it would also depend how many plants you wanted to grow, right?
Yeah, that's a great point there as well. So take a look here. Like this is a little seed starting area right here that I have with some these are peppers. Whoa, just about dropped my computer there. Peppers. And this is the 60 Fahrenheit zone. So you can see the plants down there that weren't doing so well at 60 Fahrenheit.
Right.
And so that's that's one area that I have. But then say over here, this is my larger seed starting station.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so here I've got, I'll do stuff on the very bottom there. Once I get into the season, these are all just experiments that I'm doing right now. And I've got another layer up above there. So that's then taking up a larger space, but I could probably start pretty close to like a market garden in there with the 3 layers of grow lights.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan, why do you plant like 5 seeds? Because like half of them kind of don't develop or
Sorry, what was that?
Like, why do you plant 5 seeds? Let's say if you wanted 2 plants.
Yeah. So when we like grab a pack of seeds here, they're going to have a germination rate on it. And so that germination rate is never going to be 100%. So when a seed starting company like West Coast Seeds is thinking about getting a new seed, they'll do a whole bunch of tests where they'll just see how many of these seeds germinate. And sometimes that's, in this particular instance, 98%, but sometimes it's 80% or in that range. And so if we had only one seed in there, then there's a chance that it just kind of ends up being a dud that isn't going to germinate regardless of being in the perfect environment. And so if we have 2 seeds in there, well, then that gives us kind of like double the chance or the likelihood of one of them germinating. And so, you could go about and you could start 10 seeds in there and then thin them out to just the one plant that you want. I find that, 5 seeds, it's enough that it gives me a really high likelihood of, probably having multiple germinating. But it's not like kind of going through so many seeds that you're spending tons of money purchasing endless amounts of seeds as well. And, what's likely to happen, right? When we went through the day 6 example there, pretty much everything had multiple seeds that had germinated. And so there's a couple of things that you can do if you end up having way more seeds that have germinated than ultimately you need for your garden. The first thing is that you could just thin them out. So after about 3 weeks, you could see, hey, this plant is growing best. I'm going to remove all the other ones in that seed cell. And then you've got your one plant in that seed cell that continues to grow. If you want, though, you could leave 2 of them. So you thin it down to just 2 seeds that are in there, and then you transplant both of them. And once you know that they have successfully moved into the garden, you then thin the second one out. Third option would be that if you wanted to fit an extra plant in there, you can break that little seed cell into 2. So when you remove it from the seed cell, and it's going to be a little soil block, you can pull it into 2, and you've got the 2 plants on opposing sides, and you can plant each of those separately. That's what I do the vast majority of my time, because I've started a lot of seeds now, and I know that they're actually fairly resilient. And as long as I ensure that a good amount of the root system on each one of those plants is not kind of damaged or injured, that it's going to ultimately begin to grow really, really well. And the last thing that you could do is that if you have some extras at that point, is just to give them to other individuals, friends, family, etc. That is my favorite thing to be doing. And that's why I split mine, because I then, get my garden full, and then I have like a whole bunch of seedlings that I give to other individuals in the community so that they can be getting into gardening for the season ahead as well. Another long-winded response. Great question there, though. Perfect. The other question that I was just going to ask is if any of you might happen to be going to the BC Home and Garden Show in a couple of weeks, because I am going to be presenting there twice on Saturday, once with West Coast Seeds and then once on my own, as well as on Friday evening. So I'm not sure if any of you had any plans to be there, but if you were, I would absolutely love to meet in person.
Awesome.
Hey, one other question I just thought of. Sorry, go back to seeds. Congratulations at the show, though. I won't go, but I hope you get lots of success and lots of business.
No, of course, appreciate that.
Do seeds expire? Like I had some from last year, or 5 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. Great question there. And so, yes, they do ultimately end up expiring. Usually they're going to be pretty good for, I'd say, like 2 to 3 years. After 3 years, it starts getting a little bit more iffy. And so the way that you can go about testing whether or not your seeds are still germinating is that if you take a paper towel and you get it moist, so all that paper towel is wet, and then place 10 seeds onto that paper towel, and then fold the paper towel over top. So you got moisture below, moisture above. And then place that into an open Ziploc bag or some form of a bag so that the moisture stays in there. and then allow that just to sit in a warm environment. And after about 7 days, 10 days, open it up and take a look to see if any of those seeds germinated. And if, say, 7 of the 10 germinated, you know that you're kind of working with a 70% germination rate. If only 1 of the 10 germinated, then might be time to look at putting those ones into the compost and grabbing some new seeds for the season ahead. Great questions. Perfect. Well, I think that might be, oh, go ahead, Gina.
Will you send me an email just with your contact information? Because there are going to be things that are going to come up and I'd love to chat with you about them.
Yes, please.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
I've just copied your email address there. So right when I hop off here in a minute, first thing I'll do is I'll send you an email so you've got my contact information there.
Awesome.
And then, let's find the best way to be staying in touch with one another so I can be helping you out as much as possible.
Cool. This is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, love it.
Just wondering, Jordan, one last question. Would it be good to keep seeds in the freezer? Because that's what the seed bank up in Alaska or wherever they have it, way up north. It's
do you know why they keep them in the freezer?
Well, it's like it's like a food or a seed library. So they keep a seed forever so that we never run out of seed.
Okay, so they're doing it to try and preserve the seeds for a longer period of time.
That's right.
Got you. Yeah, I think that it's not something that I've done any experimenting with or anything along those lines. But if they're doing it and I guess kind of trying to store the genetics there, then I would imagine it would work. And if there are some particular seeds that you are wanting to hold on to for a longer period of time, then that could be a good way of going about doing it. The flip side as well, say sun gold tomatoes, they're like very, very popular tomato, and there's only about 15 seeds that come in the pack. What I'm going to make sure this season is that I put a couple of those tomatoes aside and save and store those tomato seeds, and then make sure that I start some next year as well. So as long as you're kind of starting some every year and keeping some aside every year in case anything were to go wrong with the crop in that season, then I think you have a kind of multi-year window to have them still germinating, and would probably be in a pretty good place. So I wouldn't imagine that it's 100% necessary for the everyday gardener. But if it's something that you're intrigued and fascinated by, then definitely go full steam ahead on it. Cause that's I think that's generally the most important part, is just being fully immersed and fascinated in whatever kind of little gardening experience you might have, experiments you might have going on. And then some people, they will put say rosemary and lavender into the refrigerator about 2 to 3 weeks before starting that seed to simulate it feeling like it's coming out of wintertime and increasing the likelihood of it germinating.
Rosemary and what?
And lavender.
Thank you, Jordan. This has been great.
My pleasure. I always look forward to these sessions. It's so fun getting to spend some time with each of you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And Jordan's next workshop, I just looked up, is a month from today. It's March the 18th. So
perfect. Yeah,
Thank you.
Forward to it. And then I'll be in touch, Elizabeth, and probably with each of you over the course of the next week here as we figure out grow lights. And if nothing less, definitely getting some soil to each and every one of you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, everybody. Gina, expect to see an email from me in just a couple minutes here, okay?
Great. Thanks so much.
Okay, talk to you all later. Bye.
Bye now.